This could very well be the cheapest Coyote Mustang with a clean title and manual transmission to sell in the last few years, and it didn't even come to me looking like this. It was actually a running and driving complete car. The engine was strong and the transmission, well, let's just say it got me home. 4 out of its 6 gears work, which if you consider basic math, 4/6 is equal to 2/3, which is around 66%, which nowadays passes a college elective class. I know all this because I got a college degree from a very mediocre college, but if I learned one thing in college, it was that all the guys that drove Mustangs dropped out. But they're the smart ones, because a payment on a Mustang might last only 6 or 7 years, while a student loan lasts a lifetime. Luckily, I saved enough pennies by not working on my Ferraris and parking them over the last 6 months to buy this Mustang at my local auction for just $7,800. Now, we've already jumped over the big repair hurdle, which was the transmission, and I got a completely rebuilt unit for $2,000. In order to save money, I plan on selling back the old transmission as a core, and while it's not worth much, every little bit will go back into this car to genuinely try and keep it as cheap as possible. You've likely noticed, but I try and keep a very strict budget mindset when it comes to any of these car builds, even when the budget portion doesn't pan out. Some cars we fix what they need and enjoy, like my C6 Corvette. It came to me bone stock, and we ended up keeping it that way.
When it comes to a Mustang, it's just not that easy. I mean, it could have been easy. We could have fixed this car and driven it as is, but you can modify pretty much every square inch of every Mustang ever made. It's what makes the Mustang the best project car ever. And just think about the amount of performance parts that people buy and they upgrade later. So they've got a really nice takeoff part sitting in their garage, or maybe they bought it and they never used it. That's where the local classifieds become very interesting and make budget builds like this really exciting. These were on Marketplace and they were listed for just $200. I didn't even try and negotiate anything. I just saw them and said, I'll take them immediately. These are leather and Alcantara seat skins off of a Roush. And I say off of a Roush, they're really meant to go on a Roush. They're brand new. You could tell they're brand new because up here is where your holes would go for your headrest to sit. They haven't even been punched in. This came with both front seats, headrests, and obviously the bottom portion. And not just that for $200. It also came with this seat foam, this upgraded, heavier bolstered seat foam. Now the big logo here does turn the car into a bit of a hodgepodge, but does it matter? Again, for 200 bucks, these are incredible. I went online and looked for regular seat skins for this car, kind of like we did on our Corvette build. I found some used leather takeoff parts, and there wasn't a lot of stuff. A lot of people take the factory cloth that comes in the basic Mustang off to put on leather seats like this. I even went on Roush's site and tried to find these things. They don't exist anymore, probably because this is a 10-plus-year-old model at this point. But I'm going to get Sage on the seat disassembly, and we're going to get under the car because we've got a pretty big modification to take on. Between the clutch job and all the other transmission-related stuff, Sage and I have logged quite a few hours on the underside of this Mustang, and we're getting back under there today to install those long tube headers. But before we do, we always start the day by cranking up the classic hip-hop barbecue on the SiriusXM app. Now, Patchy is definitely my jam, but when we need that little bit extra motivation, I like to turn up the heat. And one of the best parts of the SXM app is that when you tap what you want, the track starts at the beginning. No tuning in 3/4 to your favorite song. Want to start it over? Just hit the back button or join in real time by tapping Go Live. There's no shortage of listening here. You can jump from some tunes to live sports, news, and even a slew of different podcasts. And anytime I'm on the road, I wirelessly stream the SXM app on my car stereo. The amount of content in the SiriusXM app is incredible, and it's always growing. And right now, when you visit SiriusXM.com/SamCrack offer, or just click the link in the description, you're going to get 3 months of the SiriusXM app for free. This is truly an incredible app that I use throughout the day, every day, and I want to give SiriusXM a huge thanks for sponsoring this video. This is the factory seat foam right here, which is in surprisingly really good condition considering what the seat itself looked like. It didn't damage really the foam at all. This little tear is because they cut a hole in the side here for the airbag, which I think is completely normal. But if you compare it to the aftermarket seat foam, the biggest difference is really the density of this material. This has a more firm feel, something you feel more on like a European car than an American car. This has that really squishy foam feeling. And you could tell the bolsters are definitely a little bit heavier, especially more here in the center. So by installing these foams, we're not just getting an aesthetic upgrade, we really are getting a bit of a performance upgrade. Sage is in the garage putting together one of those seats and it's looking really good. And while he's doing that, let's go ahead and get these ceramic finish Flowtech long tube headers ready to put in place. We already pulled the stock manifold and cap pipe out. And while I don't do a lot of tutorials, somebody asked specifically in the comment section more information on how to install your headers. The toughest part is obviously removing this because it's substantially larger than our long tube header. And the one big tip I can tell you is don't strip your nuts. Now, if you look at the size of our Flowtech long tube next to the factory cap pipe and manifold here, it's a lot slimmer, which should make the installation part a lot easier. Just like everything with pretty much every job on any car, it's a bunch of disassembly with various different fasteners, and there are a lot of nuts involved in this job, and they're in a bit of tight spots. So you're gonna need a lot of different ratcheting wrenches, extensions, converters, just every little thing you get. And make sure you definitely have a good set of these on every side, these little swivel heads. You're gonna need all of them. The big issue is if you do happen to strip a nut like I did, I stripped one nut, you're gonna need a solution to get it off because the spaces are so tight. I tried extractors and all sorts of different things on the one nut I stripped and nothing worked. But let me show you a really cool tool my friend Alex told me about. These are carbide rasps, and you can basically put them on a drill or like an angle grinder. And these are really hard metal that are made for grinding other metals. I don't think they're necessarily for fastener removal, but these worked in about 15 minutes. We were able to turn that old nut into dust and pull the mount that was stuck in place off. So I just want to show you guys these really quick because I've seen a smaller version of these for a Dremel, but these again, this bigger size really got us out of a pickle, and the whole set was like 30 or 40 bucks. Now, putting the headers back in is pretty self-explanatory, but can have a lot of tight little spaces like that little bolt right there. If you can see, it's really close to where the actual pipe sits. So in order to get to that bolt to tighten it down, we switch from a 3/8 inch socket to a 1/4 inch socket since the walls are just slightly thinner. Then we've got it on the wobble head, and then we've got the 1/4 inch extension to a 3/8 adapter. So there's just a lot of stuff like this going on when you put it all back together. Now, the problem is with that 1/4 inch driver and adapter, you just can't get the same amount of torque you can get from a bigger, thicker adapter. And so once we've driven it in as much as we can, and once that ratchet just stops turning, well, now we switched it back to the 3/8. So a one bolt you might be able to install in 30 seconds. One might take you 30 minutes. Now, anytime we do aftermarket modifications on a budget build, it seems kind of counterproductive, right? But you guys would be able to tell me better. Could we pay for these Flowtech headers with the sale of 2 of these catalytic converters? Obviously, we're taking them off the car, and the price of precious metals, as far as I understand right now, is very high. So what is this worth? Let me know in the comments what a factory catalytic converter off of this car is worth. I think it'd be interesting to find out, and well, it'll keep our Mustang a true budget build. Check out how fresh the underside of this car looks. We've got our Flowtechs all mounted up. We've got the motor mounts back in place. We've got the steering linkage back in place. I've tested everything. No rubbing, nothing like that. The fitment is perfect. And that ceramic finish really matches our remanufactured transmission well. Everything's looking basically brand new. And one of the big reasons that you see a lot of these aftermarket headers coming with the ceramic finish nowadays, besides them being just heat resistant, they don't turn colors like a factory manifold. If you notice the factory cap pipes that came out of this car, they were completely brown and like rusty and dingy looking. It just won't happen to a pipe that's got a nice ceramic finish on it like these. Sage, you're looking good repping that Holly gear. Look at that.
Yeah, you like it?
Look, oh, look how dirty it is. It shows how much you've been working. Look,
My hands look super clean. And we do want to give a huge thanks to Holly because they're the guys that are hooking us up with some of the aftermarket performance stuff that's going on in the Mustang, specifically those Flowtech headers, and now a slick upgrade solution to one of the minor problems this car came with. Wow, look at that thing.
A little dirty.
You think it's supposed to be bent like that?
I think so.
I don't think this is supposed to have that sort of curvature.
Now, the only fluid leak we found in this car when we got it was that rear diff cover, and we removed this panhard bar just to get to it. We weren't planning on upgrading it, but after looking at this, it's going to need to be replaced. And the reason why this is bent is because this car was actually lowered. It has a relatively mild Ford Racing lowering spring. And what happens when you lower these cars, since they have a live rear axle, is that it will actually jut the axle out to one side. Now, the panhard bar is what keeps your rear end straight. So if you looked at this car after it was lowered, one of the wheels was probably sitting a little bit more offset than it should have been. But they make aftermarket adjustable panhard bars. They have like a little set screw and they're telescoping in the middle, so you can shorten them and bring your rear end back in the center. With this out, we're going to go ahead and drain and fix our rear diff leak. However, we're going to end up wanting to replace this, and it's no big deal because at $100 you can get an adjustable panhard bar with some upgraded bushings that are going to make our Mustang a better handling car by tightening up the rear end.
All right, so all these run super loose. Somebody's done this before, and I can tell because two of the bolts are rounded off. So if you look at the regular 13mm driver, it just kind of hops off. Luckily, they're not too terrible, and I've got this extractor socket right here, and it should just kind of grab it and turn it off like that. Man, it felt pretty good. There you go. So while this was all apart, not only did we scrape off what was left of the factory gasket, we went and replaced it and then installed this Scott Drake billet aluminum diff cover, which is going to be much better for dissipating heat. And remember when I was removing, I said it felt a bit loose. Apparently the factory ones can kind of push themselves off a little bit under hard driving conditions. If you see the two little nuts in the center there, one on the left, one on the right side, those have arms behind it that actually push against the bearing caps inside the differential. And so if you think about it, it's bolted in with the pressure pushing back on those arms. It keeps it fixed so it will never back itself off.
Man, these are so nice. I've always loved this generation of Mustang seats. Yeah, they're not as nearly as supportive of the new ones for like track use, but who drives their Mustang on the track? These old ones feel like a lazy boy recliner. Seriously, on the 2015 and newer cars, if you're a bigger guy, they're just a bit uncomfortable, especially on longer drives. But this one has that little bit more of waist bolstering going on here. Check it out. I think they came out absolutely incredible. And to think that somebody sold these skins to me for $200. They're crazy. Now, I did a little bit more research into these. These are genuine cat skin branded seats, and if you order these from them, they'd be well over about $1,300 or $1,400. You can't even order them again in this combo. This was a Roush exclusive ordeal. And it does turn our car into a bit of a hodgepodge. However, we just got to figure out what in the interior we can match this blue stitching with. Sage went and pulled out the factory intake manifold. The Mustang guys out there already know what this means. You see, you can replace this with aftermarket and Ford Racing options that will increase the power of your stock Coyote. And since we're going with the Boss theme, of course, we got the Boss 302 intake manifold. Now, these came on factory Boss cars and they look absolutely incredible. But to be completely honest, I don't think that a lot of people have been able to prove that this increases the horsepower enough to justify its cost, at least when these cars were new. I think these intake manifolds ran from Ford anywhere between $600 and $700. But since they become less and less popular of an upgrade over time, this brand new from a Ford dealer cost me only right around $200. And while this might be a little bit of a frivolous upgrade, this in combination with the long tube headers and an aftermarket air intake is sure to gain a bit of horsepower. Yeah, I know it's a little bit like shoving socks in your underwear, but that still looks pretty cool too. Well, we might not gain a lot of power, we're gonna gain a ton of time, because while this manifold is out, we have perfect access to our two top bell housing bolts. Now, just to remove these two while we were on the ground probably took an hour, because they're obviously really recessed and they're very close to the firewall. Now, all we need is this 13mm ratcheting wrench. Since we have this aftermarket hood with the hood scoop, look, you can kind of see the top of the intake manifold through it. Look at how high it sits in the engine bay. Now, we can't finish up the install on this because this hose, this coolant hose that runs into the firewall behind it, it is busted. I already ordered it from Ford. It was like $35. So again, really inexpensive to get the replacement parts on this car. And well, there's a missing clip that goes right down in there. It'll be really easy to get to with everything taken apart, but they don't sell it. Now, if you're subscribed, you might have seen my community post about the missing clip that runs down from the brake fluid reservoir to the throwout bearing. It feeds the throwout bearing the brake fluid so that it has hydraulic pressure. So when you push your clutch pedal in, the bearing itself actually works. Now, some aftermarket company figured that everybody loses this clip during transmission removal, and they charge nearly $30 for this tiny little clip that looks like it should cost 50 cents. Now, if you didn't see this, it probably means you're not subscribed, and only about 30% of you watching right now are subscribed. So make sure you hit that red button below, because what I did is I offered up to the subscribers this sweet Puma Motorsports BMW M jacket to anybody that could help me source this clip cheaper than $27 or $28 from this aftermarket company. And I got some really awesome responses. I found out that this clip is also used in a few other European cars, most namely a Volvo and a Volkswagen. So I'm planning on heading out shortly to the Volkswagen dealership to pick up this tiny little clip where they only charge about $2.50 for it, so we can connect it all up, bleed our clutch system, and hopefully have a working transmission again. Now, I gotta take a second to address something that you guys have been talking about in the comments for several months, if not over a year now, and that's the fact that we do all our work on jack stands without a lift. The majority of the comments are, just get the lift. We don't want to see you laying on the ground underneath the car anymore. But there are some contrarian comments out there that say that working with the jack and jack stands is more relatable to the common guy. And while those are honestly really both good arguments to be had, I do want to make my projects relatable to you. And I think something like this Mustang is very relatable, something that a lot of people can attain and build in their home garages. But not everything I do is like this Mustang. There's a Ferrari sitting in front of it. We've got a few more exotic car projects coming very soon. And as the car market shifts and I tend to buy more mechanically totaled cars, the lift idea is making more and more sense. Don't get me wrong, I've wanted a lift, but I never thought that this was an appropriate place to put it. But then again, when I made that excuse in a video, you guys reminded me, well, if this isn't an appropriate place to put a lift, then why is it an appropriate place for you to work on the cars there? Now, really the end goal here is to build a big garage with many lifts in it and a big workspace. But right now, the construction in Florida is insane. People are backed up severely. And so that really puts a damper on the ability to just throw up a garage. Even a cheap metal building is no longer cheap. We're talking about 6 figures for any of these projects. But a lift, well, a lift isn't all that expensive, and it would be a tremendous asset to me in the work we do. So really, I've wanted a lift for the longest time, but then somebody brought up another really interesting comment that I didn't even think about, and that was that the floor here in the barn is likely not big enough to be able to anchor a 2-post lift. Now, most 2-post lifts need 4 1/4 inches of concrete depth with a little bit of reinforcement in them in order for you to mount one of the lift arms there. And so I went to the edge of the barn, and unfortunately it was around 3 inches. So I thought, man, I'm really stuck here. Looks like jack and jack stands are here to stay for a while. But then I went in one of the horse stalls and I started digging, and we dug a little deeper, and obviously at the edge of the barn floor where, you know, you see things, it's really neat and clean, but underneath it's a little bit more rough and there's quite a bit more depth. I measure more than 5 inches of concrete, so I can only hope that a few feet back where you could mount a lift, well, there's at least 4¼ inches, and I'm assuming there likely is. If there isn't, there's solutions around this. But one way or another, guys, we are getting a lift. Now, the funny part here, when we were working on the Aston Martin, which was similar to the Mustang because we had to pull the transmission out of it, someone watching these videos, or multiple people, send my videos to BenPack, and they reached out to me saying, hey, we've watched your videos and we really think you need a lift. And I want to thank the people that sent the videos into them, and also thank BenPack for reaching out to me, because there really are quite a few different lift solutions available, like a 4-inch low lift we could easily fit in the home garage, and when you're done using it you can unanchor the post from the floor and roll it into storage somewhere, or we could just put a normal 2-post lift here in the barn, and once we build that shop space, well, we can move it from here in there and bring the horses back in the corral. So either way, the lift is getting done in due time, and hopefully it's sooner than later, because we're gonna need it to work on that new supercar project. So things are really shaping up when it comes to the lift situation and on this Mustang build. Even though it physically doesn't look like much has been done, there's a lot of progress being made, and this car is gonna be completely different than when we got it. Now, once everything is buttoned up under the hood and on the underside of the car, we're gonna drive it out of here, get it prepped for a custom paint job over at my friend Zach's. You might know him as Ultimate Rebuilds, and we've picked out a kind of retro color, something very fitting for a Mustang, but something really eye-catching. And it will also match the Boss 302 theme that I plan on going with on this car. Now, when we got this car home from the auction, you might notice the front lower valance was a Boss 302 style. All we really need to do is put the Boss 302 grille and rear valance on this car, and it will look, again, very much like a Boss, which I really like the looks of. It looks a lot more athletic than the Shelby, which is a bit more muscular, and I've had a Shelby in the past, so a little bit of a change up is good. Now, the only question is whether you think we should put the hockey stick stripes down the side. That is an iconic Boss trait, so let me know what you think down in the comments. And now, if you're not already following me on Instagram, where you'll see the updates to the Mustang, well, before anything goes live here on YouTube, make sure you're following me right here, or just click that link down in the description. I can't thank each and every one of you enough for watching today, and I'll catch you very soon.